Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Sea of Tranquility's Rant series. I'm your host Pete Pardo, publisher and CEO of SOT. Today is Monday, January the 22nd. We're going to do a little show here based on a topic I've been kind of talking about for the last couple of weeks, something I just want to, something I'm really into, and I just kind of wanted to talk about it and rant about it for a little bit. As you know, I'm a huge music lover. I also really love to read rock biographies and autobiographies because, not only do I like the music of, so many bands and artists out there, but I like to read a little bit about, their lives and their influences and, a little bit more about the music, what went on behind the creation of the music, as well as all the dirt, like, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? So, there's kind of like three kinds of rock biography. There's the one like I just mentioned, which is where you get all the dirt. So if you want all the juice, you want to know about all the addictions and the boozing and the crazy tours and the women and destroying hotels and, the feuding and the lawsuits and all that kind of crap, there's that kind, right? And those are fun to read. There's a time and a place for those. I also like the ones that kind of go in a little deeper into the albums and the recorded history. Martin Popoff comes to mind, great author from up in Canada, also from Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles. He's done a lot of really good books on a lot of classic bands where he does a lot of like in-depth album reviews and analysis. Those are kind of fun too. And then you have the ones that are more, especially some of the autobiographies where they talk a lot about their lives, maybe from a spiritual standpoint, or, they really go dig in deep in their childhood and how they kind of morph throughout the career up until the present day. But there's also a fourth one. Then there's the autobiography or the biographies that you get done reading them and you're like, okay, there's absolutely nothing new I learned here that I couldn't have already gone onto the band's Wikipedia page and found out, right? And those are the biggest letdowns because it's like, all right, I just spent fucking $20 on this book and I got absolutely nothing new about this band or musician from reading this book. And those come up every now and then too. So, but today, I got a huge stack of rock biographies and autobiographies. I've been collecting and reading these things for like 30 years. And, I was looking over at my shelf this morning and I literally have hundreds of them. And I'm like, well, I can't just in a 10, 15 minute show you all of them and talk about all of them. But I haphazardly grabbed a few. We can do another part to this if you guys like this. But let me just get started. So there's a few here that I've read recently. Some are kind of classics. But the one I just got done reading, I'm actually in the middle of one. And I'll talk about that next or at the end. But I just finished this one like about a week or so ago. And, I've been a Doors fan and Jim Morrison fan for a long, long time. And I've read a lot of Jim Morrison books. Most people talk about the No One Here Gets Out Alive book. And that probably was the first and the most kind of historic Jim Morrison / Doors bio. But I got to tell you, I just got done reading Stephen Davis's book, Jim Morrison, Life, Death, and Legend. I enjoyed the hell out of this. Now, Morrison was a character. He, troubled. The guy was just all over the place, and it's just amazing over the span of just a couple of years, because really the Doors were only popular and on top of the world for a few years before he died in mid 1971, and this book really kind of gets you into the psyche of Jim Morrison, and what a crazy individual this guy was. He just, I think there was genius in there, but he had a really hard time kind of grasping it and bringing it out. And then, he had the bad alcohol problem. He was a drunk. He was an alcoholic, dabbled a lot in drugs. And I just think that the genius of who Jim Morrison was got kind of clouded over by the fame and the substance abuse and all that kind of stuff. And, it's kind of a shame when you really think about what he might have accomplished had he lived. But, but this book talks about all of it. The early years of the Doors, all the crazy tours, the albums, gets into the albums, talks about the Miami incident and how that really fucked him up and caused a lot of problems, and then, of course, the exile over to Paris and the kind of mystery surrounding those last couple of months of his life. What did he become? A heroin addict? A drug who he always swore to stay away from? But living with Pamela, his girlfriend, who was a heroin addict. Is that how he died? Did he die in his bathtub, from an overdose of heroin? Nobody really knows. Shrouded in mystery. But this and all the dirt's in here, okay? All the sex, all the drugs. all the craziness. A fascinating, fascinating book. And I really like the way Stephen Davis writes quite a bit. In fact, another book I'm going to talk about, I got 2 Rolling Stones book here I'm going to talk about. So this book is probably the best overall look at the history and career of the Rolling Stones. It's called Old Gods Almost Dead by Mr. Davis. 40-year career of the Stones. I think he wrote this in the early 90s. This just covers it all. As you can see, it's huge. Covers every era of the Stones, you know, from the early days with Brian Jones, the crazy years with Mick Taylor, which probably the best bunch of years the band ever had, most fruitful from a recording perspective, the crazy tours, all that kind of stuff, you know, and then Taylor leaving, and, you know, Ronnie coming in, and then, you know, the end of the 70s throughout the 80s, the 90s, it's all here. Again, sex, drugs, rock and roll, you know, this is just probably your most in-depth look at the career of the Rolling Stones that you'll ever read. A fantastic book that I've actually already read twice, and probably at some point will read again. I highly recommend that. I really like the way Stephen Davis writes. So another really great Rolling Stones book that chronicles their ridiculous tour of 1969 is by Stanley Booth, called The True Adventures of the Rolling Stones. Stanley Booth kind of found himself in the inner circle of the Stones, okay, on that tour. So this is right after Brian Jones died. Mick Taylor comes in, and they go out, and, you know, they hadn't toured in a couple of years. And this just written by someone who was there, witnessing, again, all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Okay, so if you want to hear firsthand from someone, and he partook in all of it too, if you want to hear firsthand from someone who was there with the Stones, on the planes, backstage, hanging out, this is the one. Really, really cool stuff. And, you know, and what I do want to mention too on the Stephen Davis book, if you want it gives all the dirt on what was going on out in France during the recording of the Exile on Main Street album. Worth the price of admission there alone. So if you're a Rolling Stones fan, those 2 books are great. Okay, here's one. I enjoyed the hell out of this. This is Rocks, My Life in and Out of Aerosmith by Joe Perry. Very cool book. Talks a lot about his childhood and his teenage years and the early years of Aerosmith, as well as, you know, the band's rocket ascension to the top of the charts, all the cocaine-fueled craziness of the 70s and the early 80s, getting back together, and then, you know, everything after that. Pretty cool, rewarding book. I enjoyed that one a lot. Another autobiography that I really liked. Some didn't enjoy it as much as I did, but this is called The Universal Tone, Bringing My Story to Light by Carlos Santana. You know, this one, yeah, you get a lot of the dirt stuff, but he gets a lot into the kind of the spirituality that he's encountered throughout his life. Talks a lot about his family, the upbringing, you know, the early years, and as well as the later years after the band had become very successful. A lot of talk about Woodstock in here. Talks a lot about his current wife, various failed relationships, but, you know, the important one that he's in right now, and with Cindy, and just a really, really good, very mature, fun read. Not as crazy of a read as some of these other ones that I might show you and talk about today, but I think a really good, from the heart kind of, you know, book by Carlos Santana. What else we got here? I got a whole stack, like I said. All right. Nothing to Lose, The Making of Kiss, 1972 to 1975. If you're a longtime Kiss fan, like I am, and you got into the band in the 70s and really, really love that old stuff, this is just mandatory reading for, you know, to find out all the stuff that went on when the band formed and those first couple of years, right? Those first couple of albums and all the things that they did to become as huge as they became. So this is the humble beginnings, right to the point where they're starting to become superstars, and that's it. That's all it is. There's plenty of other books that talk about that go past that, but if you want to read about the early years of Kiss, that's the one to read. All right, what else do I have in my bag of tricks here? All right. Mick Wall, another really good writer that I've enjoyed a lot of his books in recent years. This one is called The Biography of Led Zeppelin, When Giants Walk the Earth. A lot of good Zeppelin books out there, right? You know, the obvious one I'm not even going to bother mentioning, but this is another fairly recent one. that I think you will dig if you're a Zeppelin fan. Definitely one of the better ones I've read. Mick Wall has also got a really great book on AC/DC. He's also done, oh geez, I'm drawing a blank here. He's done a couple other really good books that I've read. But anyway, highly recommend that one. Again, you get all the crazy Zeppelin dirt from back in the day. Another autobiography. This is a recent one I read. It's called Best Seat in the House, Drumming in the 70s with Marriott, Frampton, and Humble Pie by drummer Jerry Shirley. So basically this, very popular drummer, played with Humble Pie all those years. In a way, this is almost as much a Steve Marriott biography as it is a Jerry Shirley autobiography, because more than half the book is spent talking about Steve Marriott, another kind of crazy character, really talented, basically a genius, one of the best singers of the 70s, who just basically went into this, spiraled into self-destruction. Kind of sad to kind of hear about and witness. But so the book, if you're a Marriott fan, you need to read this, because the majority of the book is talking about Steve and Jerry's relationship with Steve. And the book basically goes all the way up to the Fastway days. Okay, so if you really want to read a great book about Humble Pie, this is the one right here, folks. I enjoyed that one a hell of a lot. All right, what else we got here? All right, speaking of Kiss, Ace Frehley, No Regrets. Another tell-all dirt kind of thing. So, talking about the drugs and the alcohol and the women and the fights with Gene and Paul and Peter and, all the early crazy days of Kiss. And, yeah, this is the one. Not the best written book in the world, but a fun book. What else? All right, one of my personal favorites, okay, is, and again, another one of those books where the writer, and in this case it's the guy, pours it all out, tells his story, and you get done reading this, you're like, how is this guy still alive today? Okay, I'm talking about Glenn Hughes, the autobiography. I've been a huge Hughes fan for a long time, and I knew he had went through a lot of problems with cocaine addiction in the 70s and the 80s. But man, yeah, you really don't realize how bad some of these guys got until you actually read it right from their own mouths. I'm amazed this guy is alive today, and I'm sure he is too. But he's been sober now for quite a number of years, still singing, one of the best singers on the planet, rocking it out soloing with Black Country Communion. But man, his spiral into darkness in the latter days of Deep Purple, and then all throughout the 80s, his ill-timed, or whatever you want to call it, with Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath is in here. It's all in here. And all the stuff behind the scenes with Hughes Thrall, him and David Bowie hanging out in cocaine limbo for weeks on end, not sleeping or eating. It's scary stuff. But, totally entertaining. Was not able to put that book down. On the same level, okay, another one. One of my idols, Tony Iommi, Iron Man. Again, all the behind-the-scenes stuff with Sabbath. Another guy who probably was teetering on the edge of oblivion there for a while. But, again, you get a lot of the inside scoop on his early years and the creation of the band Black Sabbath and all those crazy tours and the relentlessly long and expensive studio hours trying to create some of those mid-70s albums, and then the fighting with Ozzy and, the 80s and, trying to keep a lead singer and, with Gillan and Hughes and Tony Martin and so on, and then the band eventually, getting back together and, with Dio. And, it goes into depth about the Dio years. So it's just a really, really great book. If you're a Tony Iommi Black Sabbath fan, you do not want to miss that one. What else do we have here? All right. I want to give this a shot. So this is a friend of mine who put this book out, a year or so ago. He's a big Chicago fan, so he basically wrote a biography on Chicago trombonist James Pankow. It's called Give Me a Show by Mr. Bill Fleck. Yeah, there's really none, if any, biographies on Chicago out there. So, if you're a fan of the band Chicago and you want to hear all this, the whole story, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and beyond, it's as much a biography on James Pankow as it is Chicago in general. This exhaustive research went into this, and it's just a fascinating, highly enjoyable book. If you like the music of Chicago at all, old or new, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I highly recommend this. It basically goes up until their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it's an exhaustive read. highly enjoyable. I'm a big Chicago fan. I really thought Bill did a great job on that one. All right, what else we have? There's a couple. Actually, there's two books I was going to show you on Hawkwind, but this is the first one that I read. It's called The Saga of Hawkwind by Carol Clerk. Look at the size of that bad boy. All right, this is everything you need to know about space rock kingpins Hawkwind, from beginning to most recently. It's just exhaustive stuff, and a wild book that talks about the albums, talks about the crazy tours, the festivals, the million different members over the years, the infighting, all that kind of stuff is here. In addition, I have Nick Turner's book that I've read recently that's also very, very good. I highly recommend that as well. The one great thing about that is that you're actually hearing the tales of Hawkwind from someone who was in the band for a number of years and was there from the beginning. All right. One of the best, I wanted to make sure I showed this one because this is probably one of the best rock bios I have ever read. And if you're a fan of this band or a fan of its singer, I urge you to seek this one out. It's not cheap. I paid a good amount of money for this, but it's worth getting. It's called Heavy Load: The Story of Free. Everything you need to know about the wonderful British blues rock band Free. You know, Paul Rodgers and company, Paul Kossoff. And again, at the same time, as much as a book about Free, it's also a really kind of touching and emotional story of the tragedy that became Paul Kossoff, great guitar player who again spiraled into drug abuse and obviously died way too young. And this one is littered with great archival pictures and things, photographs I should say, and it's just a wonderful book. All right, just got a couple more here. I mentioned Martin Popoff earlier. I got a shitload of Popoff books, but I just grabbed the two that I saw right off the top here. This one is called, if you're a Whitesnake fan, it's called Sail Away, Whitesnake's Fantastic Voyage. Basically chronicles the whole career of Whitesnake from Coverdale's latter days in Deep Purple, early solo albums, to forming Whitesnake, through to the 90s. It just it leaves up right before like the most recent Whitesnake albums. Very good. It basically got everything in there you need to know. And this one here called Live Magnetic Air: The Unlikely Saga of the Superlative Max Webster. One of the most underrated bands ever. Canadian proggers, hard rockers, I don't even know what you call them. They're undescribable. A great look at the history of the band and their recorded work. That's the great thing about Popoff's books, is he really gets into kind of the albums themselves. So what about some of the ones that are kind of not so great? I got a bunch of those, but I just grabbed a few of them here just to kind of give you a quick little notion. And again, these books aren't terrible by any means, but disappointing is more the word. I'm a huge ZZ Top fan. I don't think that there has been to date a really all-consuming, successful book on ZZ Top. This is the first one I read. There's a couple of them. I have a couple of them. Neither one are great, but this one is probably the worst of the two. And again, it's not terrible, but it's by Neil Daniels, who's done a lot of books, and I like some of his books, but a lot of his stuff, it seems like it's just put together really quickly, and I see some information in some of them, a lot of mistakes and some stuff that doesn't make sense. But this is Beer Drinkers and Hellraisers, a ZZ Top guide. I got done reading this, and I don't feel like I learned anything new about ZZ Top that I didn't already know. That to me is a disappointment. This one too, this is a very well-written book, and whether we'll ever see another book on this guy, it remains to be seen. And I like this book, but again, I just got done reading and I was like, I don't know how much more I learned about Rory Gallagher than I did before I read it. Well-written book, well put together. Maybe it's just that Rory didn't lead the most exciting life. You get information on the early days and the Taste years, a couple years with Taste, and his solo career and a lot of the albums. But the book is not very long, and it just kind of flies by really quickly. And you get done with it saying, okay, that was good, but I was expecting a little bit more, I guess. But still a good read. If you're a Rory Gallagher fan, you probably should check this out because, like I said, I don't know if there'll ever be another one. And this one here, I found this book. It was kind of fun, but overall, I was expecting a hell of a lot more. It's Lemmy's book, White Line Fever. And it's written by Lemmy, so I was kind of hoping for a bit more. And, like I said, it's not very thick. And, now that Lemmy's not here, obviously there's no one to really tell that full tale, I guess, from the author's mouth. We're going to get it from someone else, I'm sure. But I just kind of expected a little bit more, I guess. It's a fun book, but not one of my must-reads, I think. There's plenty others. Like I said, I've got a lot of ones that really get, I hate Motley Crue. Don't like the band at all. But that book is pretty insane. Pretty insane. I got that over there. I got books on Bowie and Grand Funk Railroad and the Neil Young book and a bunch of other Zeppelin Stones books, a bunch of Sabbath books, Thin Lizzy, all sorts of stuff. If you guys like this, you want me to do another one, I certainly can, because, like I said, a lot of these I recommend. If you're into reading books about bands and artists, musicians, I can certainly steer you into those in any direction, depending on what you like. So I've read a shitload of them, and I got more to go. So let me know in the comments if you like this, and I'll do more of them. All right? So till next time, I am Pete Pardo. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. Of course, we're here on the mighty YouTube as often as we possibly can. So stay tuned for more rants, more new more new product showcases, as well as I've got some artist retrospectives. You guys have been asking. I'm going to do a Uriah Heep one. I'm going to do a Triumph one. I'm going to do a Black Sabbath one. I'm going to do a Deep Purple one. Those are all upcoming in the weeks and months ahead, so stay tuned. Till next time, be good. See you.